Good afternoon. My name is Edward Cato Sanchin Oberholtzer. I'm the resident priest here at the Joseph Priestley Zen Sangha in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. We're an affiliate of Empty Moon Zen. Over the past couple of days, a number of people have raised the issue, have asked how Zen teachers find themselves embroiled in scandals. Surely, someone who has seen his or her original face, although usually, of course, is usually his, surely they cannot go astray. Surely they can't exploit or prey upon their fellow travelers in the way, and yet, more than one would want, they do. It set me pondering, and late at night sent me down a rabbit hole. I thought I'd invite you down that rabbit hole with me. The first stop, oddly enough, from 1972, is the stage of the New York City Ballet. I used to go to those ballets back when I was an undergraduate because George Balanchine had a habit of setting ballets to pieces of music I could find performed nowhere else. I don't remember exactly what I'd gone to hear on that particular evening almost 50 years ago, but I do know what I did hear. At the end of that evening's program, there was a ballet set to the Four Last Songs of Richard Strauss. If you don't know them, as I didn't at the time, then surely you know Strauss as the composer of that fanfare extracted from his Also sprach Zarathustra, and used so effectively by Stanley Kubrick in his movie 2001. The Four Last Songs were somewhat different. Not the bombast of Strauss's tone poems, but a lush, beautiful, and deeply affecting farewell. One of the last pieces of an elderly 84-year-old man looking death in the face. Balanchine had the soloist standing by herself on the stage, while dancers went through their paces in a setting reminiscent of a ballet studio. As the piece came to its conclusion, the singer ended the last song, and the orchestra swelled up and died away in a long, drawn-out coda. As it did, the one male dancer left his group and walked slowly over to the side of the soprano and, in the last measures of the piece, laid his head on her shoulder. To this day, that music and that image makes me weep. And here's the thing. Richard Strauss, who wrote the Four Last Songs in 1948, had been named Reich Minister of Culture for the Third Reich in 1933, with the ascension of Adolf Hitler to the German Chancellery. At that time, and for a long time afterwards, that dissonance of a Nazi who could yet write a piece of music so transcendently beautiful haunted me. Now, lest I've poisoned your view of Strauss, I should point out that he was a more complex man than I had initially thought. He didn't seek out the ministry. It was thrust upon him as the most famous living German composer at the time. He lasted a year, leaving the post when he refused to take the name of his librettist, Stefan Zweig, off posters for an opera he had composed. Zweig was a Jew, as was Strauss's daughter-in-law and his grandchildren. Strauss may have been many things, but he was not an anti-Semite. He survived the war and protected his daughter-in-law and his grandchildren from the horrors of the Holocaust, but there are plenty of others who did not have such transforming backstories. Ezra Pound, one of the great poets of the 20th century, supported the Italian government of Mussolini during the war, openly sympathizing with Hitler and condemning in radio broadcasts the United States. He died an unrepentant fascist and yet remains one of the great poets. How do we understand this? The 17th century Italian composer Carlo Gesualdo murdered his wife and her lover, and yet is known for some of the most extraordinary madrigals in choral literature. The 16th century Italian painter Caravaggio also left behind this amazing body of work, works of great beauty, of genius, executed in the midst of a life of criminality. An eye or an ear for beauty is no guarantee of a life of rectitude, any more than is a deep knowing of the way. Alasdair MacIntyre, a Scottish philosopher who taught me as an undergraduate, was assigned at the end of World War II the task of translating the diaries of the German commandant of a concentration camp. What he found was a man who read the poetry of Goethe, who listened with pleasure and appreciation to the chamber works of Beethoven, a man who expressed love and concern for his wife and children, and who would go off then each morning to commit acts of unimaginable horror. And both sides of this man's life appeared to be true. And how do we understand this? Now, I've practiced Zen for decades, and so my first touchstone when I consider scandal-prone Zen teachers is the simple observation from my own teacher that if you're a jerk before you're enlightened, then after enlightenment, you're just an enlightened jerk. And maybe so, but Zen orthodoxy tells us we are all Buddhas, the good, the bad, the indifferent. You and me, all of us, even the jerks, even those of us worse than jerks, worse than monsters. If even a dog has Buddha nature, and make no mistake about it, despite or because of what Zhao Zhou said, even a dog does have Buddha nature. If we do, and we do, then there are those of us who, having glimpsed that Buddha nature, nevertheless, despite that vision of their own true nature, act in ways that most charitably could only be called unskillful. We are, as the Dharma tells us, an assemblage of traits, of skandhas, of heaps. As Walt Whitman, that 19th century Buddha, tells us, I contain millions. And if we are an aggregate, then it's not so strange to see MacIntyre's camp commandant acting each evening in his own home, surrounded by family and friends as a cultured mid-20th century loving father and husband, and in the morning at the camps as a monster, as a nightmare. And perhaps it's not so strange to see Zen teachers stumble and fall, to see them go astray. Astray is perhaps an appropriate word, since the precepts we are given are more goal than rule, and we all have the opportunity to fall short, to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and as Nat King Cole sang, start all over again. I've always appreciated the Greek word for sin, Amartya, a term taken from archery, meaning to miss the mark. We are, all of us, good, bad, and indifferent. If enlightenment is an accident, if Zazen makes you accident-prone, then it is no wonder that there are those among us who, having attained the great way, having found the boundless, continue to trip, to fall, sometimes flat on their faces, on our faces, and sometimes, unhappily, bringing others down with them and with us. Last week's koan hit the nail on the head as Bai Zhang told his predecessor, another Bai Zhang, an enlightened person does not evade the law of cause and effect. The Five Remembrances remind us that My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. Enlightened or no, cultured or no, supremely talented or no, you do not evade the law of cause and effect. Koan Yamada said that Zen is the polishing of character. Yamada's own teacher, Yatsutani Hakuen Roshi, supported Japanese militarism during World War II and, strangely, held anti-Semitic views both during and after the war. And yet we owe him a debt of gratitude. We owe him, much as Western Zen owes him. Flawed as he was, he pointed out the way for us. We take the good points. We don't forget the bad actions. And this is true not just with our teachers, but with our families, our friends, our companions, with ourselves. Skillful, unskillful, good, yes. Bad, yes. And indifferent, that too. Life itself, much less Zen, takes hard work and constant practice. Stepping off that 100-foot pole, returning to the marketplace with bliss-bestowing hands. It's so easy to see that glimpse of the boundless as an end. It's not. Thank you.